Hey kids, I am so glad to see you again. I am playing with this toy. Do you remember what that means? Yes, that reminds us that we are doing a curriculum series called The Roller Coaster Life, because sometimes we are at the top of our lives and we are feeling great, and sometimes we're at the bottom and we're not feeling so great. Have you ever been on a roller coaster? They are a lot of fun, aren't they? Maybe you looked a little bit like this. Did you look like that when you were on the roller coaster? Were you hanging on with your mouth wide open, screaming as you went down the roller coaster or up it? I know that I sure do. I sure do. Well, we are talking about Elijah and how Elijah had ups and how Elijah had downs in his life. And we're going to continue our story. Last week, we talked about how Elijah had the up of going and standing and talking to the king, but then a down because he had to run and hide. And then an up again because the ravens brought Elijah food and he was able to get water to drink from the river that he was beside. So things were looking pretty good for Elijah. He was up here. What do you think might happen in our story today? Yep, you probably are right. He might kind of head down like you would on a roller coaster. Yeah. I am going to bring Elijah over and he is going to help tell our story. Elijah, it's good to see you today. He says it's good to see all of you kids too. Well, every time, if you'd like to play along, I say Elijah's name. You can either stand up or you can sit back down or you can raise your hand or put it down, and we'll let it be Elijah. We won't necessarily go along with like if he's having an up day or a down day. We'll just say whenever I say Elijah. Okay. Well, when we left Elijah, he was in a pretty cool spot. God had sent ravens to bring him food. Elijah had plenty of water to drink because he was beside a brook or a river. However, you might remember the warning that Elijah had given King Ahab. He said, "It will not rain." What do you think happens when it doesn't rain? That's right, rivers dry up. That is exactly what happened to the brook that Elijah was drinking from. Elijah was back on the roller coaster. He went from the high of being beside the flowing river to the low of being beside a dry riverbed. God spoke to Elijah. He said, "Go and live in the village of Zarephath. There's a widow there who will feed you." So Elijah traveled to the village of Zarephath. When he arrived, he saw a widow gathering sticks, and he asked her, "Can you bring me a cup of water and some bread to eat?" The woman replied, "I don't have a single piece of bread in my house. I only have a handful of flour and only a little bit of cooking oil, and I was about to cook this last meal, and then my son and I will die." Was she having a good day or a bad day? She was having a bad day. She probably had a lot of bad days all strung together. Things were really, really hard in her life. Well, can you imagine this? Elijah said, "Don't be afraid. Make a cake for me and then make something for your son. God will provide." Can you imagine how the widow must have felt when Elijah said that? Here she was about to make a small meal for her son and herself, and now this prophet comes along and says, "Make me a cake first." She must have thought he was crazy. Do you think she did it? Let's see. But the widow did just as Elijah asked her. She gave Elijah the cake to eat. Then she went back to the flour and cooking oil containers. Do you know what she found? She found even more cooking oil and flour. She made a meal for herself and her son. And not only did she make one meal, but every time she went back to her jar, there was more flour and more oil. God had provided a miracle. God continued to provide all the flour and oil that she needed to care for herself and her son. So, do you think she was having a bad day anymore? She was having a pretty good day, hopefully a lot of good days, all put together because she obeyed and because God provided for her. So we're going to be learning, Elijah, more, aren't we? Yes, more about how God can provide for our needs. Just as God provided for Elijah and fed Elijah when there was no food to be found. And also how God fed the widow and the widow's son. God will provide for us also. Elijah, we are so glad that you could come and tell our story today. Yeah, do you want to say goodbye to the kids for now? Poor Elijah. We need to see if we can fix his hat so you can see his eyes better. Yeah. Okay. All right, Elijah, we're going to set you over here and we're going to talk a little bit more about our story. Our scripture lesson from today, I have big sheets for you today. Our scripture lesson for today says, and God will generously provide all you need. 2 Corinthians 9:8. Have you ever had a hard time in your life? Maybe your family has talked about it as well. Maybe you could talk about this with your family and ask them, have we ever had a hard time in our life when we didn't have enough and we were worried? Maybe it was enough food, or maybe it was enough work, or maybe it was enough family. It could be all kinds of things. This scripture reminds us that God will generously provide all you need. Now, I remember when I was in Sunday school as a kid, I learned a very important lesson. There is a difference between a need, which is something you must get taken care of, right? And a want. Yes, God might not provide everything we want. We might not get the car we want or the house we want or the gaming system that we want. But more often than not, God will provide what we need or can help us find ways to get what we need. Yes. So God will provide. This is such an important lesson that we learn from Elijah. You know, sometimes when we forget that God will provide what we need, we worry. Do you ever worry about things? Things that you can't really maybe do a whole lot about? Yeah. How does worry make you feel? Not very good, right? Sometimes it makes us feel kind of like we're on a roller coaster. Our stomach kind of gets all churned up, right? Yeah. Sometimes when we worry, we can't sleep very well at night. Yeah. We have to remember God will provide what we need. And the first way that we can let God help us is to admit we have a need. You know, the lady, the widow in our story, she admitted to Elijah that she couldn't feed him because she was almost out of all of her flour and out of all of her oil. If we will admit our need to God, that is the very first step to helping God provide for us. The next thing we have to do is be willing to obey God's instructions. You know, Elijah, being a prophet, told this lady to go and make a cake for him first, then herself and her son. She might have said, I might have even said, no way, my children are going to eat before I feed a perfect stranger, right? But she obeyed God's instructions. So that's the second step to allowing God to provide our needs, to admit we have a need, and then secondly, to obey God's instructions. And then this is the really good news. If I can obey God, God will provide. Isn't that good news? Yes, if I will obey God, God will provide what we need or what we want. What we need. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I hope that as you think about this upcoming school year, you will remember that. If you start to feel worried or troubled or sad or angry, that it is good for you to admit that you need something from God. And then sometimes you have to tell your parents that. That's how it kind of works its way to God, is that you let somebody know, or maybe a counselor or school or a teacher, let somebody know that you have a struggle. It is okay to admit you have a struggle. And then you have to obey God. And then what do you know? You will find that God will provide for your needs. And it might be a miracle, kind of like the oil that continued and the flour that continued to fill up those jars that the widow had. Or it might be that God brings a person into your life that can help you. Maybe God will bring a new friend to you, or maybe God will help you through a teacher that understands how much you're struggling in math or something like that. God works in mysterious ways, we like to say, and I just know that God is working in your life as well. Well, if you are watching this video in August still, I want to encourage you to get your backpack or get a picture of yourself in your remote classroom or something like that. We are going to be doing an online back to school blessing for children and youth, as well as school administrators and teachers and school staff. So if you are an adult, just take a picture of yourself. If you want to add your lesson plans to your picture or something else that represents school to you, I would love for you to send a picture of yourself to me, Kim at EHUMC, so that we can do a special back to school blessing on September 6th. I would love to have your pictures though by August 26th. So try to send those in. This is the year 2020. If this video is still out there and it's a different year, please don't send me your pictures. But if it's still around August of 2020, I would love to have a picture of you with something that represents school so that we can do a wonderful back to school blessing on September 6th. It's been great to see you today. I look forward to seeing you next week when we continue our talk and our learning about the ups and downs of life, the roller coaster life. Have a good week.